Desert axemen were one of Egypt's many troops. Their axes were made out of simple bronze tops were attached to wooden handles. Their shields were made from wood planks, strapped across and nailed by bronze plating. The Egyptians needed to improve their weapons, so early bows and arrows were simple. The bow was a long piece of springy wood bent to a curve with a string attaching two ends. Arrows were made of light reeds from the Nile. Egyptian archers had very light armor, strapped across their chests. Sometimes there were light chainmail, but not often. Egyptian chariots were used to rush onto enemies. They were armed with swords on the wheels, and the chariot men were sometimes armed with bows or spears. They could also use knives. The horses would rush up, and they would have a great chariot charge, and the enemies would flee. The horses had little armor, but the men had armor. Sometimes they would go on foot, set on foot when in the midst of battle. Nile spearmen were packed into tight formation and had very long spears to stab their enemies in the front. The shields were used to fend off arrows or oncoming attackers. Turtle formation is when they would put the shields up in the front and the people in the back would put their shields on top of their heads and protect everybody so that arrows could not penetrate their defense. Egyptian spearmen wore heavy armor to protect from blows against enemies, but they were slow. They carried a large shield, large spears, and they had heavy armor. They were some of the main troops of the Egyptian army, though. The Battle of Megiddo is one of the oldest battles in history, for which historians have details in. It was fought in 1458 BC. The first year that Thutmose III ruled Egypt. The account carved on the wall of the temple shows Thutmose III was a great leader as the Prince of Kadesh. Kadesh, a city in Syria, wanted to take control of the city of Megiddo in Palestine. Megiddo was important to Egypt, so Thutmose III marched north to save it. He rushes his men through the hard, dry land to reach Megiddo before the enemy expects him. His advisors had told him to take an easy road, but Thutmose was bold. He took his men through a narrow path to save time and arranged for them for battle when the enemy arrived. The Egyptian chariots swept the enemy, attacking from the sides and back. Finally, the enemy forces were overcome, and Kadesh's army fled to the city, leaving their chariots and armor behind. Thutmose had arranged his Egyptian troops for battle before the enemy troops arrived. Chariots were positioned in the front, and foot soldiers followed behind. Foot soldiers from the Prince Kadesh's army protected the plains. The group was shocked when the Egyptian soldiers attacked without warning. The Egyptian chariots attacked without warning, and Kadesh's men were so disorganized that they had nothing to do but being trampled over and stabbed by the enemy Egyptians. Behind them followed the foot soldiers, which helped the chariots and backed them up. Kadesh's armies fled as they were being trampled and run over. All Kadesh could do was run.